Okay, hello everybody. This is Tim Suttle. I'm the pastor of Redemption Church, and I am joined here by one of our church members and a good friend of mine, Dr. Michael Vogel, who is here to talk about something I've been reading a lot about, which is that me, all my friends, and apparently a whole bunch of people around our country are having some freaky dreams right now. Everybody is dreaming a lot. And experiencing kind of some change in our sleep patterns. And so I know nothing about this, but I'm super curious about it. And so Mike Vogel agreed to come talk with me about this. And we're recording this just to put it out there and see if it's of interest to you and see what we might learn together in discussing this. So my first question to you is, what is dreaming? I mean, what is going on and why do we do it?
Right. There are lots of theories about dreaming. There are at least 4 or 5 major models. I'm going to camp out on one that is based on this idea that it's symbolic and meaningful. So to compare and contrast the 2 prominent models, one was historically kind of a Freudian one, which is to say that your dreams meant something about what's happening inside of you. And in the 70s, a guy named Alan Hobson presented this idea that, hey, kind of like a computer, this is just a sort of accident, and you look at it later and sort of make meaning of something that was meaningless, kind of like you would with the Rorschach or something like that. That's actually been debunked quite a lot based on common neuroscience. And a less common but actually quite scientifically validated perspective is that these are meaningful, motivated experiences internally intended to some ways help you. We talk about that more as we go, but in some ways I'd say the simplest way is this is your own internal way of trying to proceed through life well. This is helpful for you. Dreams are not accidental and they are not meaningless. That's the perspective I will be espousing today.
All right, excellent. So they are from us and they are for us in a sense.
I think that's exactly right. You know, how you have a physical body with a physical immune system, right? That's helpful. To have an immune system in and of itself is not a good or bad thing. If you don't have an immune system, maybe it's even terrible. You'd be a bubble boy. But the immune system reacts with symptoms, right? And you get kind of itchy eyes, and we're in Kansas City, so we all are going through the allergy season, as many of us in the country might be. And if we just settle for the symptoms, we miss that there's a bigger process happening underneath it. And in the same way, your dreams are symptoms. They're kind of like the kind of manifestations of something bigger or more of a system underneath it. And we can treat the symptoms, we can ignore the symptoms, but we miss the meaningful process underneath it that's actually trying to help us cope. It's like our immune system for our soul, our inside world. And that's one way to look at dreams, among other things.
Okay, so you say soul, inside world. I'm assuming that part of this is involves the subconscious or unconscious things that are getting worked out.
Yes, that's good. So the idea of an unconscious has multiple meanings, and I'll kind of define this because some people think like getting knocked unconscious, like you're just not online, you know, in the sense of like unawareness. And a lot of people will agree, like, yeah, there's an unconsciousness, like this is part of yourself you just don't know. But what I'm suggesting in the camp that I'm in, which is sort of a psychodynamic, psychoanalytic kind of, not Freud, I'm not a Freudian, but I think Freud is onto something, is that the unconscious is not just like an off switch. It's actually something that's quite alive and quite motivating, that it's actually more kind of determining or influencing the way you live your life, even if you're not aware of it. So it's not like dormant or passive. It's quite active. It's quite alive. And that view is that it plays out very clearly in some ways in your unconscious life, which is dreams, among other things. And so that's kind of what I mean by the unconscious. And versus the consciousness, it operates kind of like on a different logic system. And so if you don't understand the logic system, it seems silly. And most people think, I don't know if a dreams mean anything. But if you can understand the logic of that system, it's actually quite interesting, quite profound. So maybe that is sort of a primer to what I would say, but I don't know if that made sense, Tim, but.
Yeah. So what is the logic? Like if what are ways to think about kind of particular dreams? Let's say I wake up and I've had an odd dream and I'm trying to make sense of that. How can I approach what I'm remembering from sleep?
Okay, well, let's start off with the logic of dreams and then the kind of practical stuff. Dreams are funny. They're like okay, think of it, this is all metaphor, but think of it like a Guy Ritchie movie. You are watching the end of the movie first. You are not starting off in the beginning. The dream is the end of something. So if you can wrap your mind around that and hold that tension from the beginning, you'll get something more out of it. And what is it the end to, the resolution to? Well, something that's happening in your current day-to-day life. Usually an emotionally charged or complex thing that you may have a lot of time to focus on, or it may be kind of lingering, kind of like a low-grade fever, but it's something emotionally taxing to you that you haven't spent enough time in your day-to-day because you're too busy with whatever else. But at night, the process is still continuing, and the dream is trying to figure out a resolution. Okay, so if you wrap my mind, dream is the end, not the beginning. And it's not necessarily determined end, but it's like, hey, here's one possibility. Here's another possibility. And so that said, if you have multiple dreams in the same night, they're the same kind of theme, but ending with different endings. They're trying on different ends. And so it's the same concept, just with different, like, choose your own endings.
Okay,
But there's more to it. Okay.
So let me ask you then. So are we talking about like these are things I haven't gotten to yet? These are, or maybe things I don't realize are bothering me, or maybe these are thoughts I won't let myself think. I mean, or is it just, it can be any of those?
The answer is yes, yes, and yes. The things that you haven't gotten to, but there's something that's unresolvable in your day-to-day life. You just sort of like, I need to think about what I'm going to do for my job, or finances, or relationships, or whatever is something going on in you. And that's part of it. Or I'm not allowed to question these things, or find myself with a dilemma of one kind or another. There's something taboo about it, and it might be on your mind, but you just can't bring it up. It just feels somehow off limits. Or it's something that you're just not even aware how much it's wearing you down. You're just so caught up in the moment that those things are just sort of in the background and almost like unattended to, like on the back burner. And so any of those things can be true. I think it's good to kind of make one or two distinctions right now. The kinds of dreams I'm talking about are more common dreams. There is a different kind of thing, which is nightmares, which are sometimes like in trauma work. Like, let's say that someone has suffered trauma and they're having flashbacks. It's a little different game than what I'm referring to. And that's a little different than night terrors, which is what we see kids usually about 3.5 as the onset, go on until about 12, happens in about 30% of kids. Not quite the same process, maybe more with night terrors, but outside of trauma flashbacks and little kid kind of nightmares or night terrors, I'm talking about the common everyday dreams that most of us have.
And you lump in with that like recurring dreams as well, or is that a different category?
Recurring dreams fits in this perfectly. There are some trauma dreams that are flashbacks that recur. It kind of has a similar feel to it in terms of like, take this seriously. Recurring dreams, friends, are the kinds of dreams you absolutely need to pay attention to. What is happening is that immune system, if you will, is saying, hey, you're not listening. Hey, I need to tell you it again. Are you not hearing this? How many times? And so it's trying to say, like, pay attention, pay attention. This is not resolved, and it's taking a lot of energy and life out of you, or maybe something that you need to care about a lot more than you're making space for. So recurring dreams may or may not fit, but I think usually they do fit. The only time is when there's like a recurring like trauma dream that's like a flashback. It's a different feeling totally. A fourth possibility is there are, I think, prophetic dreams, which is a little different. And I'm talking about the kind of ordinary day kind of dreams, ordinary kind of run-of-the-mill dreams that everybody feels, unless there's something really unusual. You may not remember it, but everybody dreams, unless there's something neurologically like damaged. So that's very, very, very uncommon.
Okay, so then for like the just as a clinician, give us kind of your insight into how you might think about a particular dream. Like, what are the options for how to frame it for somebody like me who I don't have training in this, let's say I wake up and I've had some dream. How do you approach it?
That's a really good question. Two more things, and then I'll say that, which is to say, while the end is the beginning, that's good. And the other two things are displacement, which is a fancy word to say, don't take things at face value. The people, the figures, the experiences aren't literally the thing. They're the symbol of the thing. The experience that you may have is sort of symbolized by this image, this person. It's displaced onto it. And so if you settle for a literal interpretation or what's called the manifest content, you miss the meaning. It's like, okay. But if you look at this as like it encapsulates this experience, but it's got kind of more meanings like layered on it, like, oh, that kind of symbolizes all of this. That's one part. There's disguise in it, that things aren't always what they seem. If you can imagine it this way, this is sort of how I like to sort of think of it. You have a director inside of you, and your director is personalizing the stories for you. Now, nothing is worse than going to a movie and sitting with somebody who is like the whole time, like, cars can't really go that fast and planes don't really, and they like get so literal they can't let their imagination kind of run wild because they're kind of caught in the concrete. That kind of process, the concrete process, does not work with dream interpretation. But if you realize that there's a director giving you a movie, essentially, trying to give you something meaningful, and you read it like you would read poetry rather than an essay, then you get it. Then you start to get it. The language, the kind of way that dreams are written are poets' kind of love languages. The way that our conscious life is written is like essays and prose. And so go poetics here. With that said, the first thing to do is, this is controversial, but I think the most common way that dreams are understood and how I encourage people to think about it is, firstly, be really, really curious about it. Don't take it literal. So you're having sex or whatever else. Don't get caught up on that. Don't worry about that literally, and just sort of be curious about it. Go into it like you would a dream. And so I think that you should keep a journal by your bedside, or at very least a phone. I think it's more helpful personally to record me telling my dream to myself, even when I first wake up. You will forget your dream. It will decay over time if you're not kind of diligent. But I think write down your dream, take it seriously, or speak it into something that you can listen to it again later. Tell the dream, and the devil is in the details. All the details, every little details. Get all the details. Get sensory, because it's written in a language that's primarily physical. You know, it's image based. You're going to notice the colors. If there are smells that you notice, or kinds of sensations or shadows, that's all really, really important. Go into that. That's what I would first say. Practically, keep at least a journal or diary or something by your bed, or a phone where you can kind of chronicle it when you wake up, or even record it. That's first and foremost. And just be really curious.
Okay, so now as we were talking about this earlier, you mentioned two specific things: the interpersonal and interpsychic approaches. Like, can you explain that terminology?
So yeah, and I think you were asking about this, which I kind of got sidetracked. Sorry. Which is to say, the first way that then I would read through this dream is to listen for interpersonal characters, like who is who. So like you might say, oh, my grandfather was there, or my friend showed up, or you were there, or whatever. And it's simple to say the characters represent those people. And that's not wrong, but that's sort of like the first lowest hanging fruit. But the interpersonal is like saying these are different people in my life. And that's one layer of making sense or interpreting a dream. The dream is meaning like you are trying to figure out the dynamics that are as of yet unresolved, emotionally or interpersonally or socially. The other way that's a little deeper is to see these as pieces of yourself too. It isn't one or the other, it's both and. That there are parts of yourself in tension with other parts of yourself, you know, that there's a part of you that wants to do this and a part of you that's telling you that you need to be responsible and you can't do that. And the conflicts that creates, that's another layer of it, at least. And that is usually called the intrapsychic, like this parts of yourself trying to communicate to other parts of yourself, you know. If you've ever read any Henry Nouwen, he writes like this because he thought this way. He was trained in this tradition as well. And it's like this part and this part, this character and this character. The parables are about all of you. All the people in the parable are parts of yourself. That's the same idea, for instance.
So that would mean like you're trying to figure every character or even objects and things in your dream.
Right.
Since this is all happening in your mind, they're you as well, or they can be, you can interpret them as, maybe drives, desires, something within you that needs consideration.
1,000% true. Right. And that's another level. And it takes a lot more energy to make that kind of meaning of it, obviously, than it would be interpersonal. But I think dreams are layered. And if you can sort of see that having kind of sort of surface level, middle level, and deep level, you can take the surface level and that's still going to have something to offer. But you're onto something when it feels like, yeah, that makes sense to me. And it's expanding what I already know. It's meaningful.
Okay, so it's not like it's not that you're trying to like decode the dream, like say like Daniel did for King Nebuchadnezzar or something. You're not trying to decode it. It's flashing a light at you going, you need to consider this. You have some like soul work, emotional work to do in this certain area. Is that right? It's like a prompting.
Yeah, a prompting, a harbinger. It can be a decoding, but I think it's right to see it as sort of like a, hey, pay attention to me system. And so one thing that's happening at some level is in your day life, in your waking real life, something is happening and you have a way to detect it. You know more than you know. You're picking stuff up. And it's not the logic. It's like the sensory thing. You feel it, and it's in the air. It's in the relationship, and it's almost beyond words. It's unspoken, and so it then transcends the sort of thinking logical part into a deeper level of symbols, of emotions, of past relationships and patterns that are almost unspoken patterns. And so that's what dreams are trying to access. And the idea is that the dreams are trying to say, hey, something is up here and it's unresolved and it's troubling you. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's on your mind. Like, do I take this job? Is it a good thing? I don't know if it's a good thing or whatever. It could be troubling too. And the dreams are saying, hey, pay attention to me because this could end poorly or it could end really well. And it's giving you an option of an ending. It doesn't mean it's the ending. It just means I'm trying to highlight this is the tension. This is the dilemma. And the idea is it's trying to encourage you to take it into your waking life and think and reflect on it. Dreams are powerful. Let me say something about that. Songs are written. Yesterday by the Beatles, Paul McCartney wrote that during his dreams. Rolling Stones wrote I Can't Get No Satisfaction. Jimi Hendrix wrote Purple Haze. Albert Einstein and Thomas Edison both solved problems in a dream state. Dreams are intended to be problem-solving states of mind that are creative and playful. The artists know this. And people artificially create dream-like states with substances to be creative. There's something that people know that they're in touch with the creative part of themselves. And usually poets, the musicians have played around with this in other ways.
That's fascinating to me. So you use the word play, and you also, I'm in my mind, that's crashing together with another statement you said, which is we know more than we can say. Like there's actually, I think we all understand on some level, there are unsaid things between us and other people. There are things we don't say because might hurt people. There are things that we don't say because just emotionally we're not in a place where we can give voice to that. So the dreams are possibly where we're trying to get up the courage to say what we somehow know. Is that part of what's happening?
Right. And there are, so Freud, yes. And Freud said that the dreams are usually some coded nightmare. Like, even if it works out well, the idea is like, hey, this is the best case scenario, but if that doesn't work out, plan B is not so good. And so he thought all dreams were essentially nightmares, whether they're explicitly like, oh, that was terrible, or that was a good dream. And it's like, that's if it works out well, because if it doesn't, plan B is a nightmare. he was in disagreement with other people later, like Carl Jung, who said, actually, these are perspective. These are solutions. And so what we see is this tension between this could work out really well, or it can be a nightmare. But it's trying to present possibilities, not answers exactly, although some of them might be helpful, but it's trying to highlight both. This is a problem. Here is what the dream is trying to say, like, we have to resolve this. It's attempting creatively to resolve the tension, the drama, the complication. And your internal director is saying, hey, pay attention. Let me make this interesting for you in the best way I know how. And you are the intended audience of your own dream. And so the idea that dreams have universal messages is really something, Jung said that, but really we don't think that as much anymore. Dreams are personal. So the idea is like, what does it mean to you is less important than is you taking time to reflect on what your own internal director is trying to say to you, the intended audience. Now, others might know you well enough to be able to understand your audience, you, but primarily you have to be the interpreter of your own dreams because you are the intended audience of the director inside yourself. That sounds really silly. I'm using metaphor, but be enchanted. This is really, really interesting. You are created with this possibility to be wise in this way.
So let me make sure I'm getting you right. So there aren't like, I don't know what you would say, how you would say, like archetypal symbols that there's not like, we're not trying to decode things like if I don't know, if there's chocolate cake in your dreams, chocolate cake represents this always. It's not like that, right? This is all personal. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and the one exception is you're talking about archetypes, which is really, really spot on terminology-wise. Carl Jung, who came in the 1910s, 12s, around there, and into the 1920s, really talked about this universal stuff. So he wrote a book about universal symbols or archetypes is what he called them. And yeah, there's a camp that does believe that. That camp is less common, but it does still exist, and that's not wrong. So things like open bodies of water have often represented wombs and often pregnancy and things like this. So like if you were to be falling off a bridge in a car into a pool of water, the idea is that's a symbol of there's a fear about pregnancy. You know, either you're pregnant and you're worried about that, or you're afraid that you don't want to get pregnant, or there's some anxiety around that. And there's a lot of people who find that those are helpful symbols. So I wouldn't say that they're not true, but I think there's a lot less weight put on trying to memorize those. You know, things like descending a stairwell can often mean, in its older ideas, two things. One is kind of retreating down into the unconscious, like the deeper meaning of like what's going on underneath for me. Or it can also mean things like going into one sort of kind of reproductive world, you know, like creating. It was often associated with things like the fallopian tubes and these things like that. Now, that's, again, not very common anymore. In a postmodern world, the idea that this is a very personalized thing is probably more common than in the modern world, which is like general, like everything is sort of copy paste or kind of like conveyor belted. Very uncommon in most camps, but it does still exist. And so I should probably put that little caveat out there, but I don't buy it as well.
All right. Got it. Excellent. Okay. So now the
groundwork.
Central question. Now I'm going to ask you to kind of somewhat step outside. I know your area of expertise, but I think you could probably have some insight into why is it? Why are we dreaming more? What's going on? Because I'm not kidding, man. I hear this just interpersonally from friends. I'm seeing it in media. I'm seeing it written about. Like we as a society right now, all of a sudden are dreaming in ways that we haven't before. What's your best guess on maybe some of why this is happening?
Yeah, that's a big question, and I really think that's true even in my own life. But yeah, there are lots more There's a lot more commentary out there of people dreaming. You know, there's probably practicalities to it in the sense of like substance use absolutely affects it. So if you're taking sleeping pills to fall asleep, not as helpful. If you're highly stressed, let's say that your job is super stressful and the commute, those are gone for most of us. At least right now, they're paused. And so there's a sense like how nature is starting to kind of rehab it. re-inhabit kind of certain places and clouds are kind of, or smog is clearing. Maybe in our own busyness, there's a slower pace that's less stressful, requiring less substances to fall asleep, like a nightcap or a sleeping pill. And that then allows us to enter into a dreamlike state. For instance, if you're smoking pot or taking a drink, you're less likely to enter into the stage of sleep that is characterized by dreams. Um, that's not true with CBD oil. They don't think that's true, whereas THC, that is. So for whatever that's worth. And that's also not seeming to be true with things like melatonin. That's a naturally occurring substance. So it doesn't seem to have the same effect as from what I've read and understand. By and large, though, I think we're using less substances, our lives feel a little slower, and we're taking a little more time to pay attention to what's going on for us. We're also very disembodied right now, and I think our bodies are screaming out in terms of our mental life. Hey, pay attention. You're going slower. Get in touch with yourself right now. You are staring at, the Brady Bunch of screens and Zoom all day. And so the sense of like paying attention to what's happening, to be connected with oneself. I think also related to it, there's probably more of a sense of I'm able to sleep in a little more. I don't have to wake up as early for commute, do different things. And with that, over time, that promotes dopamine, that kind of like sensation seeking, thrill seeking kind of thing. And the more dopamine that naturally happens as we sleep longer promotes dreams. Actually, the body's recovering and just starting to have more dopamine available, I would think. And that allows for more clear kind of potent dreams that we might remember. So I think a combination of things, less stress. Equally though, I say less stress, I think there's this like omnipresent stress of like COVID-19 and all the financial and every other kind of thing going on. That is like a low-grade fever that is omnipresent too. So we have less stress in maybe our commutes and these other things, but we have this like kind of chronic stress too that is needing to be paid attention to. Less substances, more sleep, more dopamine. I think it's kind of a perfect storm.
Would you say there's a sense in which like our bodies are they're a little more maybe healthy? Even a lot of people exercising now that weren't before. Also, we're in close proximity with family very often, or the very opposite, we're just completely alone and somewhat isolated. So there's a sense in which there more than one variable here is coming together. We're a little more healthy. We're eating a little better. We're maybe not so stressed. We have more time for sleep. Maybe even we're letting ourselves sleep and wake without alarm clocks kind of stuff. Plus there's a lot we're chewing on. There's a lot we're working on. There's some kind of psychic trauma that's I guess you would say like culture-wide, worldwide, in a sense, that we're trying to work out as well. Do you think that's in there?
Absolutely, all of the above. And so it's really kind of a perfect storm. And lean into this, my friends. I think because what's happening is something actually trying to keep you healthy. The dreams are not irrelevant. They're actually quite potent, and they're intended to help you kind of resolve. And maybe if you're having conflict with who's in your household or having troubles with who's not or anything else related, it's trying to help you be proactive and aware of, hey, this is starting to become a trouble for you or something that's on your mind. So let's address it. And I think what a gift dreams are.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and maybe this could kind of wind down our discussion, unless there's anything else that you think we should know. Do you think? I mean, dreams are quite personal, and it's a little alarming. I mean, like I'm thinking of several friends who have shared something with me that they dreamed. This is very personal, even like scary, or I don't know. What's your opinion on if it's important to try to talk about these things and process these things with others? Is that a good idea? Is it dangerous?
Yeah, you have to trust the others because they need to know you well, and you need to have a sense that you can sort of muse, in ways that are pretty vulnerable. Because these aren't obvious to you right away, they are going to involve a sense of vulnerability. So you have to really trust with the person with whom you're sharing this, and they have to know you well enough to be able to comment on this. So there's that, and I think that's helpful. That's why it tends to be brought up mostly with clinicians, therapists, things like this, but it doesn't have to be. It never was intended to be, really, but that's kind of the only space that most people have. I think you could bring it up with a partner or a friend who knows you well, or some family member, as long as you could trust that they're going to be able to keep it kind of confident and be creative about it and think kind of in a sort of poetic way. And in that case, I think it's really rich. Yeah. So,
Okay, so give us a quick plug. If somebody's out there and this is happening and it's not something they want to maybe share or don't have somebody, you work with folks who do this on a regular basis, who I'm assuming have kind of switched over to telehealth and stuff like that. Especially if you're in the Kansas City area, who could you get a hold of?
Right. Well, I think if I were looking for someone to get a hold of, I would go to something like Psychology Today. And the kinds of tags which you can kind of specify are psychoanalytic, psychodynamic. You want somebody who's got specialized training in psychodynamic, psychoanalytic training. Now, everybody will say that they've heard of it and they may know about it and they might be sensitive or kind of aware of it, but you need specialized training to interpret dreams. It's sadly not taught in most programs of graduate level. So it takes a postgraduate training. So I would look around, ask for that psychodynamic, psychoanalytic training of any kind or another. I would ask about dream interpretation. A lot of clinicians I know think, yeah, that's really interesting, and I didn't learn how to do it. If you're looking for your own kind of like stay-at-home kind of thing and you want a book I recommend for the person who wants to just kind of understand it, it's written clearly. It's called Decoding Your Dreams by Robert Langs. Really, really estimated book. It's an older book. It's brilliant. It's written very well, having read enough dream theory to know. He's saying really, really complex things pretty clearly, and he's very practical. He wrote it for his patients. And so as a person who may not be a clinician, you can read it and say, that's helpful. And it's fascinating. It is so interesting. If you're not interested, check your pulse. It's so cool. And so he's trying to help us think through that in a more systematic way, and he talks about it in very practical ways as well.
And part of what's going on in, I guess, psychoanalytic or psychodynamic psychotherapy is it does involve a recognition that there's just a lot going on down there in the unconscious or subconscious. And that, and this is not some big fearful thing to be afraid of. That's a gift, like you're saying. And that there are these signals that our body gives to us that something's bothering you, or that maybe you have work to do on some stuff that's down there. I just think it's fascinating to think about it. Those unconscious things coming out in a time where we have some space, almost forced into some space. It does make me kind of hopeful. It also makes me just think, man, these are hot rods, these bodies we've been given. They are hot rods, man. They can do amazing things. And so I hope you guys, I hope you'll be encouraged during this time that if you're having some freaky dreams, there's not something wrong with you. This could be a good sign. Does that do justice to what you're saying?
Absolutely. If you're having freaky dreams, that means you're alive and you're paying attention at some level. That's a good sign. Now, what to do about them, take some time and think on them seriously. Write them down, reflect on them, go over them in certain ways. We can talk about that if you want, Tim, or I can kind of defer to the book, talks about it. The shortest version is this. Your dreams have been triggered by something that happened probably in the day, 24 hours before you went to sleep. There's a reason they're right now this way. And so something happened in your waking life that may have primed it, prompted it, triggered it. So think about what is going on yesterday, today, that may have really primed the dream now. Then kind of go through the dream. Follow the emotions. If there's a certain emotion through it, follow it, kind of like a shark after a blood. Like, what is the emotional kind of turning? There's a sense of like, oh, this is going well, and I enter this room and it's terrifying, and you kind of follow it that way. Pay attention to any remarkable figures or even items in the dream. If there's a particular like weird bowl, or the house reminds you of something, think symbolically. It's not the literal thing. It's intended to kind of prime you in artistic ways of the symbol of the things plural. follow the affect, follow the symbols, and try to tell a story that has something of elegance. At the end, it shouldn't feel like this, like really, really kind of like loosely strung together thing. It feel potent emotionally, and talk about a dilemma or something that is going on in your day-to-day life. And may not resolve it, but it may tell you that this is something that's occupying your nighttime life. And frankly, these dreams will recur sometimes, but they quit recurring when you pay attention to them. It's because your body says, finally, we made it through to you. And I have this happen all the time. It's like, you paid attention so we can quit playing this on repeat. You know, you finally starting to get it. It's an incredible gift. It's enchanting. Drive it like you stole it. You know, these bodies are amazing, and just realize this is a feature that you don't usually tap into, but it's there, and this is what makes you luxury. So tap into it. It's really fun.
So you want people to kind of muse and be curious and wonder, but then when you said it'll be potent, like what you're looking for is for somebody to kind of have an aha, like the light bulb goes on and it feels like an insight into themselves. That's what you're looking for. Is that right?
Exactly. It should feel surprising, but not like I've never thought of this, but like, oh, that's interesting. I know it's on my mind, but I don't realize it's driving that much of my mental life. It's taking a lot of energy. And on top of that, it should expand possibilities. It's not just like new or surprising. It is, but it's also like, oh, okay, it gives me some possibilities to sort of see like maybe what feels like it's at stake if I don't resolve this, the nightmare, and know like this could happen badly. Or it can be like, oh, that would be a really nice resolution to it. You know, I wish that would work. You know, and don't settle for anything at face value. So like I work with people who get really scared about things like, I was having a dream about sex and there was an affair and all these things. And it's like, okay, because sex is rarely about sex. You know, it's about maybe intimacy, connection, and it's not even the person in the dream that you're necessarily wanting that intimacy with. It may be just sort of kind of symbolized by this person's dream. That's the fun part about dreams. So it isn't the same as doing it, which is kind of fun, but just take it sort of seriously, but poetically. And if you like art, if you like movies and get lost in that, you'll love dreams. Because you get that every night if you pay attention. I think it's the coolest, freest entertainment you're ever going to have. And plus, it's useful in terms of how to maybe inform your life. So it's like double whammy. It's like a personal class. It's really cool. So
that's so great. Well, thank you so much for your insight. And to everybody watching, thanks for taking some time to think about these things. If there's anything that we can do for you at Redemption Church, don't hesitate to reach out. Our website is redemptionchurchkc.com. Thank you, Dr. Michael Vogel, for spending some time talking about these things. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, if you want to hear more, you can reach out to Tim or get a hold of me that way. And if you don't agree, that's okay. I'm okay with that. I realize this is a controversial thing, but hopefully it's inspired you to learn more and look into it. If you want to read a neuroscientist, Mark Solms, Solms, is on YouTube. You can watch him forever. He's the world's leading expert on this. He's in South Africa. Fascinating. Watch YouTube on it too. Hey, why not?
All right. Cool. Thanks a lot, man. All right, you guys, have a good day, everyone. Peace.